What does an 18th century revivalist preacher have to do with K-dramas? And would he have even watched K-dramas? I'm not sure about the answer to that one, but I do know that Jonathan Edwards, the preacher mentioned, shared a very big theme with K-dramas, and that is passionate love. God is truly and deeply in love with us. He is obsessed with us, but in a holy way, of course. Many of Edwards's works focused on that deep love of God for his people. And I know that often Edwards is thought of in terms of fire and brimstone, along the lines of sinners in the hands of an angry God. But Edwards wrote so much more about love than hell, and so much more about love than judgment. Edwards came back to the centrality of God, which is love. And like all K-dramas, like the work of Edwards focuses on the centrality of love. And both can attest that love, true love, changes everything. For context, I thought we would look at 3 pieces of work, 2 from Edwards and 1 K-drama, and they are undoubtedly very different in scope and mediums. But the overriding theme of love cannot be missed in any of them. For Edwards, the theme of God's love is evident throughout many of his writings, and he was quite prolific. We have over 1,000 of his sermons to look through. But for our time together, I thought we could focus on just 2 of them. And that made me realize, of course, we have to look at Charity and Its Fruits, which comprises 15 sermons that Edwards preached to his Northampton congregation in 1738. And the second is a sermon on Galatians, delivered also to his congregation in Northampton, Massachusetts in late 1728 and early 1729. And that sermon is titled, Christ's Particular Respect to Every Believer in His Work of Redemption. Now, this sounds very different from our K-drama, Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha. Christ's particular respect to every believer in his work of redemption, Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha. They have a slightly different ring, but make no mistake, they both have the same thesis, which is love. Now, Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, one of my favorites, and I would see it again if I had time today, aired in 2021 and centers on the relationship between 2 characters, Hae-jin Yoon and Tu-sik Hong. Hae-jin is a beautiful, successful dentist from Seoul. As I'm talking about her, I feel like she's my friend and I know her. But due to some unexpected turn of events, she ends up in a small, quaint seaside town called Gongjin. And Mr. Hong, or affectionately called Hong Banjang, which is Chief Hong, and I'll just call him Hong Banjang from now on. And he has this name because he takes care of most of the community's problems. And he is the heart of Gongjin. And in fact, he's quite the handyman. He helps many Gongjin residents solve their day-to-day problems. And this is one of my favorite scenes where he busts out with all of his credentials, such as having his realtor's license and carpentry and furniture making credentials. And he just shows it and it falls down. This scene shows the first inklings of love that they feel for each other. But Hong Banjang is trying to keep things very professional, and he tells Hae-jin that he will only be paid minimum wage for all of his services as he charges all the other residents of Gongjin, which I think is very cute and quirky. Hong Banjang is a beloved and important member of Gongjin, and so when Hae-jin decides to stay in Gongjin, set up a dental clinic, and there's obviously some flirting that starts between the 2 of them, the townspeople try to figure out if she's the real deal, sincere, loving, and worthy of Hong Banjang. And there are a variety of issues that spring up in their romance. They're both strong-willed. They both have their ideas of how to do things. But really what surfaces is that they both have a lot of trauma and hurt from their past. So Mr. Hong's family had died in a car accident. I think a lot of K-dramas have car accidents. And he is dealing with a lot of pain and guilt from that. And Hae-jin's mom died at a very young age. And though her father remarried a lovely woman, she is still reeling from that loss. And so as they are trying to really get to know one another, those traumatic moments surface. But eventually, love wins, and their commitment to each other wins out. And their relationship shows that love provides meaning in life, courage to face hard things like trauma from the past, and also provides healing in their hearts. Now, switching back to Jonathan Edwards, his first sermon in Charity and Its Fruits is titled Love, the Sum of All Virtue. And this sums up the heartbeat of Edwards' point about God. He says, quote, "The word properly signifies love, or that disposition or affection by which one is dear to another. The word agape in the original, which is translated charity, might as well have been rendered love, for this is the proper English of it. So that charity in the New Testament is the very same as Christian love." Later, Edwards directly states, "Love is the principal thing which the gospel reveals in God and Christ." He went to great lengths to make this point, and he wrote often about the all-consuming, powerful, and pure love of God. It's the powerful, all-consuming love that we see happening in Kongjin. But of course, the difference is that human love can't compare with God's perfect love. Unlike the trauma that Haejin and Hong Banjang are dealing with, God has no trauma, of course. He's perfect, but he comes down to save us in our sin and trauma. And God loves us perfectly and reveals that love to us. And if we as God's children have been affected by that perfect love, that we have received and experienced that love, then we can't help but to be transformed by it and to love God back and to love others. Edwards said it this way, "If your heart is full of love, it will find vent. You will find or make ways enough to express your love in deeds. When a fountain abounds in water, it will send forth streams." And we all have something that we love, that we're passionate about, and it's hard to suppress that. And in the same way, when we love someone, we can't help but to express that. This reminds me of a scene in Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha where Haejin and Hong Banjang want to conceal their feelings for each other, but they just can't. It finds full vent. And one way that is demonstrated is that they just want to spend time with each other. They want to be in each other's presence. They want to have a meal together, but they can't because the residents of Kongjin aren't sure if Haejin is quite worthy of Hong Banjang yet. So they go to great lengths to hang out with one another without getting caught. And so they have to wake up at the crack of dawn, or they have to make sure that they meet in obscure places. And so that's one way where love finds vent. It just wants to be with the thing that is loved. Another thing is that love is protective. And it reminds me when Haejin makes a mistake, she's at a community event and she speaks something out of turn and people hear her. And so after that, everyone is so angry with her and the members of Kongjin shun her. But Hong Banjang comes and saves her reputation, even at the risk of his own. And they're all at a community meeting and he busts into the meeting and he comes in, he says all the right things and he tells everyone why Haejin is worth giving a second shot. And he woos everyone's hearts by bringing their favorite snacks, which I think is so brilliant and really cute. This shows that love wants to spend time with the beloved as well as protect the one that is loved. This is a picture of the charming people of Kongjin. And they love Hong Banjang. And in a lot of ways, he's a surrogate son to many of them. And so once again, when Haejin is there, they're on the lookout to make sure that she is going to love him truly. This reminds me of the similarities between Kongjin and also Puritan New England, where both communities are very tight-knit. And they care about each other's business, almost like I am my brother's keeper. And their standards of what is right, of what is proper, of what is righteousness is something that we can see in both communities. And though Puritan New England is very different from Kongjin, we can see that not only for their desire for love, but in these ways that are so caring, really tight-knit, is shown in both communities. The relationship between Hongbanjang and Haejin is pure, it's beautiful. And not only does it find vent in the ways that we talked about, but it really does in a lot of ways show the definition of love in 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient. They are patient with one another as they're trying to figure out their trauma. Love is kind. Love desires the best for one another. And love covers a multitude of sin or faults. Like it says in 1 Peter 4:8, that love is something that it doesn't point out the errors of others. And so we see that as Chief Hong Banjang, tries to cover Haejin's wrongdoings. And he really does show that he's willing to even take a hit in his own reputation for the sake of her own. Now, like we said, Kongjin and colonial New England are indeed worlds apart. Kongjin is a fictional seaside town, and 18th century New England is obviously centuries in the past. Though they are indeed worlds apart, we can see that love, which is our central theme, is at the core of human living, that the center of human searching, that regardless of time and culture, that love is what tethers us, what gives us reason for living. Now, colonial New England might seem like an austere place to us, and it was, but not in the way that we might think. Puritans are often thought to be repressive, killjoys, attackers of pleasure, those consumed with thoughts of hell, persecutors of innocent women, such as at the Salem witch trials or perhaps the trial of Anne Hutchinson. And this picture, I think, says it all. The Puritans are enjoying a good laugh, and they're not laughing at all. H.L. Mencken said in the 1920s that Puritanism is defined as the haunting fear that someone, somewhere may be happy. What we fail to recognize is that a lot of these stereotypes were propagated primarily through fiction, and the fiction writers used Puritans as characters to talk about their own era. So Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter, which was published in the 1850s, was really talking about the 19th century or the 1800s rather than 100 years prior or hundreds of years prior for colonial New England. And so it was more a commentary on repression and the strict moral codes of the 1800s rather than really the puritanical era. And the same was true of Arthur Miller's The Crucible, which was published in the 1950s. And they used Puritans from the 1600s to really comment on what was going on during the McCarthy era and the witch hunt and the Red Scare that swept America during that time. So what remains in the American consciousness is the ideas that fiction had largely propagated, but it doesn't give nuance to writings like of Edwards, where they focus so much on charity, on love, on kindness, on giving. And personally, I think Jonathan Edwards and the Puritans at large have gotten somewhat of a bad rap. While sin, judgment, and punishment were definitely a part of Edwards's writings, he more often focused on God's love, and that God's love compelled him to pay the full price for our transgressions. That it was God's love that caused Jesus to come down and rescue us. And it's not just any kind of love. It wasn't just any kind of rescue attempt, but it was personal. Edwards writes, and this is a quote, "He had the names of every one of them upon his heart." Imagine your name, my name, our names written on God's heart. And Edwards goes on to state, "But the love of Christ is boundless, and because he greatly loves multitudes of others, Yet that is no emptying of the fountain of his love, because the fountain is infinite. His dying love is not divided, but is, as it were, wholly exercised towards every particular believer. This means that each of us is individually, personally, and specifically loved by God. His heart is that big where we can each have that personal relationship with him, and we can all be his favorites. Sometimes we might not have that romantic love, or we might not even have the love of family. And so K-dramas can make us feel like, well, maybe I'm missing out because I don't have that love that Haejin and Hong Banjang had. Or maybe even with friends, we might not have that kind of love that is all-consuming. But there is one love that is always there, that there is no limit to the love of God. And so while K-dramas are such a great picture of what love looks like, God's love is obviously that consummate, perfect love that cannot be compared with any love. K-dramas and Jonathan Edwards and the human journey shows that love is a timeless pursuit. And whether in Kongjin, Puritan New England, or 21st century America, we know that love changes everything, and it is the ultimate purpose in life. And as followers of Jesus, we believe that there is only one perfect love, and that is in our Lord Jesus. And because of his passionate love for us, we can love him and others freely.